Welcome back. My name is Chris Pawlowski. I'm a photographer based in the south of England. Today I wanted to share with you the first in a series of documentary style conversations with artists, craftsmen, musicians, and really anybody I think has a story to tell. The first in this series is documentary and marine seascape photographer John Brockliss. Now, John is a Brighton-based photographer and currently has an exhibition running called Shoreline, and it's running at the West Pier Centre in Brighton, which is situated on the seafront right underneath and right next to the I-360. I'll put all the details about the exhibition and the opening times in the box below. John talks about his life in photography, his inspiration behind the Shoreline exhibition, and his workflow, and how he uses his Leica-M cameras. He has a great passion for Leica, and he will explain all about the way he uses them. So if you find this video interesting and you enjoy it, please like it, subscribe it, and feel free to comment. And I look forward to making another video in this series very soon. Without further delay, I would like to introduce you to photographer John Brockliss. My background goes back a long way, hardly surprising. As a schoolboy, I was fascinated by art, and I knew from a very early age I wanted to pursue the rest of my life in some way or another connected with the visual world. As a result, I went to art school. I went to art school and studied fine art. And then, having started a fine art course, I specialised, changed direction slightly, and studied to be a graphic designer. It was a very new industry at the time. I actually knew almost nothing about it, and part of the 3-year course was to study and practice photography. And the more and more I found out about photography, the more fascinated and interested in it I became. I had a very good set of tutors, full range of technical equipment at the time, so I learnt how to use plate cameras, 2 1/4 square cameras, 35mm, and all aspects of printing. And I've never forgotten it, you know. Having graduated, I went on to follow that career. I worked for over 40 years as a graphic designer, and then ultimately a graphic design consultant. And I had my own business in the end with 2 studios. Had the business with 3 co-directors, and we had 2 studios, one in the King's Road, London, and the other in Cornwall.
The inspiration behind the Shoreline exhibition really goes back 10 years, because for 10 years I have been studiously photographing the shorelines of Britain's coastline. I've photographed them both from the shore and from the sea, because I have a second interest, and that is sea angling. And I usually take my cameras out to sea with me. Not if I'm in a small boat, but if I'm in a big boat, I'll take them out to sea with me. Can be risky, can also be very, very wet, so you have to be careful about the equipment. This exhibition came about as a result of that work, and I met Rachel, who's the MD at the West Pier Centre. We had a very, very good initial discussion, and as a result of that, Rachel invited me to exhibit here this year. Of course, we didn't know at the time that the COVID pandemic was come in, so we've had to work around that. So we've had a few stop-starts. Luckily, we're in start at the moment, and we focused for this exhibition on the West Pier for obvious reasons, because of the fundraising work that Rachel and her team are engaged on. We've made the West Pier a central focus of the exhibition, and included a range of shots from far and wide throughout Britain as well. Colour or black and white? Well, there's a question. What's my preference? Well, my preference, big surprise, is black and white. I've always loved black and white. It, for me, it's really the expression I'm most comfortable in. Even on my colour work, I actually shoot the colour work with the screen set to black and white, and I do that so that I can focus on the composition and not be distracted by colours. Now, you might think that's mad, it probably is, but that's the way I do it. I use two cameras though. This camera is a Leica M9. I use this obviously for colour work. I used to do black and white conversions from it, but now I only use it for colour, or when I limit myself to one camera only. This was a breakthrough camera for Leica. It was the first digital rangefinder that they made with a full frame sensor in. It was introduced in 2009, sadly no longer produced, and has a CCD sensor which gives the most fantastic signature to the images that it creates. For black and white work, I now use my other camera, which is this Leica Monochrom. This is the second iteration of the Monochrom. It has a CMOS sensor in, and for black and white work I find it sensational. The advantages it gives me is I can work in very, very low light. I can work at much, much higher ISO or light speed settings, which gives me the ability to be much more experimental with my apertures. And the way I use it for landscape work particularly is almost always I work with a glass filter. In this case I've got a yellow filter fitted, which helps with the rendition of skies, particularly skies and clouds. It makes a huge difference, and because of my increasingly dodgy eyesight, I can't shoot with my varifocal lenses. I just cannot get things in focus. So I, on both cameras, work with a little tiny lens, which I hope I don't drop there. It's a diopter, and it's optically corrected for my particular eyesight. And I lost one recently, tragedy. Once you've lost them, you'll never find them, so let's put it back before I lose it. There, bear with me, there we are, that's all back and working now. And that's it, that's the equipment I use. I don't use tripods. I don't find they're spontaneous, and these are not a logical camera to use for landscape work, but I treat landscape as effectively an extension of the work that I do with street photography and other forms of documentary photography, where I can capture human interventions with the landscape, chance encounters, moments of transitory light, climate, whatever, when I can work quickly and get what I'm after in an instant. I just find working with a tripod too limited. Do I remember my first camera, Chris? Yes, I do. It was a wonderful piece of high technology. It was called a Kodak Brownie, and it had one button on it, and that was it. And you pressed the button and you got a picture when you went to the chemist with the film. Absolutely brilliant, or as I did, develop the film myself. When I was studying photography, I worked for a year with a Kodak Brownie, nothing else. Everyone else they had these things called pentaxes, which I'd never heard of. Anyway, the reason I was so Luddite in my approach was that I wanted to concentrate on composition, and it was a very good discipline because I followed that principle to this day. Once I'd done a year apprenticeship with my Brownie, I moved on to another Kodak camera, Kodak Retinet 2B, I think that's what it was called. It wasn't a rangefinder camera, it was halfway towards a rangefinder camera, and I spent the next 3 years of my college training working with that camera, processing and developing my own films. Right, now there's another difficult question. Inspiration. Too many to name, but I'll have a go. As a student, with more and more interest, finding more interest in street photography, I discovered Henri Cartier-Bresson. Like everyone else, I still think he is one of the most amazing photographers who ever lived. And of course, his chosen camera was the Leica. And I understood how he worked, how he composed only in camera, how he never had his pictures cropped, and right or wrong, I followed those principles to this day. And other photographers that have influenced me that I would mention are Dorothea Lange and her work with the Dust Bowl and Depression in America, Margaret Bourke-White with her work with Gandhi and 1930s industry and the war. Quite remarkable films, not using Leica cameras, of course, but a different approach and great results. I was particularly interested by the work of American photographer Edward Sheriff Curtis, who spent a lifetime documenting the world of the sadly decimated North American native Indians, shall we call them. His work is absolutely outstanding and was also beautifully reproduced in a set of volumes, gravure printed volumes, and I've actually seen the original books and they are remarkable. It's a process that's almost lost because of the expense in producing it. In more recent years, two photographers have particularly fascinated me, is not the right word to use. I admire beyond belief. One is an Icelandic photographer, One, an Icelandic photojournalist called Ragnar Axelsson, who has spent many years documenting the frozen world of Iceland and Greenland and the rapidly disappearing Arctic. And the other photographer, and the one who I admire probably more than anyone else, is Sebastião Salgado, the Brazilian photographer and photo campaigner. And his work is staggering, truly staggering. Both of those photographers have worked with Leicas. They've also worked extensively with other cameras. Now, there is a common link between those people that I've mentioned, which I hadn't appreciated until very recently, and that is that they are all involved in serial projects, long-term projects that come together to form a massive work. And actually, that's what has drawn me more and more into my own work. So that's what I've tried in a small way to do with marine landscape, and I'm currently working on a separate project that I've been working on for 2 years now, which involved me in work in northern Spain, and I'm halfway through putting a photo documentary together about that work.
Can you tell us any more about that?
Not at the moment. I'm strangely superstitious in some ways, Chris. I was all ready to go to publication. I've written and designed a book about this project. I was all ready to go to publication, and along came the pandemic, and I've shelved it. And I'm just now going through the process of revisiting it, because I'm going to rewrite it retrospectively, knowing what the pandemic has done to our world. Because what I did, the work I captured, actually won't come again, and some of it won't be possible again as well. So more of that hopefully later in the year. Yes, I do all my own printing, like you. I've got a 9-colour Epson printer, so all the prints in the exhibition here I've printed myself. Because of my work as a graphic designer, I've got a very detailed knowledge and understanding of all the printing processes. So I know in my head what can be done and what can't be achieved in any of the main printing processes. So I try, and that directs the way in which I process the pictures and also how I print them. So I've set myself more limitations. I only use one paper type because I know how it performs, and I only use one settings for my ink settings. And it takes a long time. I'm very demanding on myself, as I know you are, Chris, and I've learnt a great deal. I don't do anything that I wouldn't have done in the darkroom. I will dodge on the screen, but I will not manipulate the pictures. I won't. I never work with layers, and I avoid all forms of manipulation as well. Just as well, because half of them I don't understand how to do anyway. The Shoreline exhibition has had a long run. We're running through until Sunday the 17th of January 2021. Because of the current restrictions, the gallery is only open on Saturdays and Sundays, so it's 11, usually it's 11 in the morning till 4:30 in the evening. Details are on my website or on the website of the West Pier Centre. We're on the seafront in Brighton, so wonderful walk along the prom, taking the exhibition as well, coffee, meal, it's all there. And if you come, I hope you enjoy it.
Well, thank you very much, John.
Thank you, Chris.
Good luck with everything.
Thank you very much indeed.